The woman grabbed my sleeve just as I reached for the aspirin. "Dad," she whispered. That one word sliced through 45 years of silence like a knife. Before I tell you what happened next, let me say this. Subscribe, hit the like button, and tell me in the comments how old you are and where you're watching from. For you, it's a small thing, but for me, it's the reason I keep sharing these stories. I stared at her, this stranger with calm eyes and a face that tugged at something in my memory. "You must be mistaken," I said, though my voice shook more than I wanted. "My daughter, she died in the flood, decades ago." But she didn't back away. Instead, she opened a worn envelope, hands trembling, and pulled out a photo. A tiny girl in a yellow raincoat, curly hair, bright smile, and the man holding her, me, younger, full of life, before the river swallowed everything I loved. "My name is Corinne," she said quietly. "I found this after my mother passed. Your name was in the box." My heart thudded like it wanted to escape my chest. I felt dizzy, old, and suddenly 17 again, standing on that muddy riverbank screaming her name. "Where did you get this?" I croaked. "You and I need to talk," she said. "Somewhere private." And just like that, everything I thought I buried came clawing back to the surface. I thought it was impossible, but the truth was only beginning to show its face. We ended up in Marla's Diner, the only place in town where the coffee is strong enough to wake the dead and the chairs squeak louder than my knees. Corinne slid into the booth across from me, looking like someone who'd rehearsed a conversation her whole life and still didn't know where to start. Marla marched over with her usual charm, which is to say, none. "Earl, honey, you look like you saw a ghost," she said, slapping a menu in front of me. "Or worse, you remembered it's senior discount day." "I'm fine," I muttered. "Just coffee." "And for your granddaughter?" Marla asked. Corinne blinked. "I'm not. She'll have coffee too," I cut in. I wasn't ready for explanations. When Marla shuffled away, I folded my hands on the table to keep them from shaking. "Tell me everything," I said. "From the beginning." Corinne took a slow breath. "When my mother died, I found a box hidden in her closet. Inside were documents, a hospital bracelet, and a letter with your name. She told me, when I was little, that my father died in a flood. But then I found a photo of you holding a girl in a yellow coat. The same coat I'm wearing in the only baby picture I ever had." A tremor ran through my chest. I remembered that coat. I bought it at a clearance bin for $5 and bragged about the bargain for months. "But Corinne, the flood took." "I know the story," she said softly. "But what if what you've believed all these years wasn't the truth?" The diner felt suddenly too small, too bright. The sound of forks clinking, the old jukebox humming, the man in the corner arguing with his BLT, it all faded. "You're telling me my daughter survived?" I whispered. "I'm telling you," she said, eyes glistening, "that someone lied. And I think you and I were both victims of that lie." Just then, Marla returned and plopped down 2 coffees so violently they nearly baptized us both. "If you two start crying," she said, "do it on the side that's easiest for mopping." A tiny laugh escaped me, first in years when talking about Lydia. But inside, my world was cracking open. Little did I know, someone else in my family already knew she existed. We walked out of Marla's Diner together, the morning sun hitting my eyes so hard I almost tripped on the curb. Corinne caught my elbow, steady, gentle, like she'd been doing it all her life. "Careful," she said. "I'm old, not fragile," I grumbled, then immediately stumbled again when a pigeon flew at my head. "All right, maybe a little fragile." She gave a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. There was too much weight between us now. "Let's go to my house," I said. "If we're pulling ghosts out of the attic, we might as well do it where the ghosts actually live." My house sits at the end of a quiet street. Peeling paint, stubborn mailbox, and a porch that creaks in the same spots that my knees do. Inside, everything feels frozen in time. Old photos, dusty record player, that same crocheted blanket my late wife hated but never threw out. Corinne walked slowly through the living room, her hand brushing the mantel. "You kept all this?" she whispered. I cleared my throat. "My wife, Miriam, she couldn't let go of Lydia's things. I didn't have the heart to take any of it down after she passed. So it stayed." Corinne paused at a small wooden box on the shelf. A music box, Lydia's favorite. She wound it without asking, instinctively, like she'd done it before. But when the lid opened and the tiny ballerina spun, something impossible happened. Corinne hummed the tune. Perfectly. Softly. like someone who knew every note. My breath caught. How do you know that melody? I don't know, she said, her voice trembling. It just came back to me. A cold wave washed over my spine. I sat down heavily in my old recliner, the one that growls angrily every time I lean back, and tried to steady my thoughts. That box, I said quietly, was the only thing they found upstream. They said the rest was swept away. Corinne knelt beside me. Earl, tell me about that day. Everything. I hadn't spoken about it in 45 years. Not once. Not to anyone. So I started. The rain. The river rising too fast. The wooden bridge snapping. The scream. The flash of yellow. And me, flailing in the current, grabbing at anything, begging God to take me instead. Corinne listened without interrupting, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. When I finished, she whispered, "Someone saved me, Earl. Someone took me. Someone hid the truth from both of us." My blood turned to ice, because there was only one person alive back then who hated me enough and loved Miriam enough to do something like that. My wife's sister, Harriet. And suddenly I realized I wasn't just uncovering a mystery. I was about to step into a war I didn't know was still raging. When Corinne said Harriet's name, the air in the room tightened. My late wife's sister, sharp-tongued, stubborn, and built entirely out of disapproval. A woman who believed every problem on earth could be solved if people simply listened to her. And she hated me. Not the casual, holiday dinner kind of dislike. No, Harriet hated me with the determination of a professional. Corinne wiped her eyes. You think she'd take me? Why? Because, I sighed. Harriet always thought I was irresponsible. That's rich, I added. This from a woman who once burned her own eyebrows off trying to light a scented candle with a space heater. Corinne snorted, which was the first non-sad sound in the house. I pulled out an old phone book. Yes, I kept one, and flipped through the yellowing pages while mumbling to myself. Harriet! Harriet, still alive, still mean, still probably yelling at the mailman. She lives nearby? Corinne asked. Unfortunately, I said. A 5-minute drive. 10 if she's standing outside waiting to criticize your parking. I grabbed my keys. My hand shook a little, but not from age this time. If Harriet really took Corinne all those years ago, if she lied to everyone, I didn't know whether I'd shout, cry, or faint dramatically onto her lawn. Probably a little of all three. Before we go, Corinne said softly, "Can I ask you something?" Sure. She hesitated, chewing her lip the same way Miriam used to do when she was nervous. Do you want me to be your daughter? I mean, if it's true. That question hit me harder than the flood ever did. My voice came out rough. Corinne, I never stopped being a father. I just didn't have a child to raise. She touched my arm gently. A simple gesture, but it felt like someone stitching a wound I'd carried for decades. Then, because life never lets deep moments last, my recliner suddenly made a loud, complaining BWWAK noise behind us. Corinne jumped. I sighed. That chair has been judging me for 20 years. We both laughed, awkward, fragile, but real. Let's go see Harriet, I said. And as we walked out the door, I felt something I hadn't felt in 45 years, hope. But I didn't realize that Harriet wasn't the only one hiding the truth. Another family member had been waiting for this moment, and not with good intentions. Harriet's house looked exactly the same as it did in 1979, paint peeling like old sunburn, lawn gnomes arranged in strict military formation, and an NO parking, not even for family, sign hammered into her grass. I see she's mellowed with age, Corinne muttered. Oh yes, I said. She's basically a sunflower now, one that spits venom. We walked up the stone path, each step squeaking like the stones were snitching on us. I raised my hand to knock, but before my knuckles touched the door, it swung open. Harriet stood there like she'd been waiting on purpose. Short gray hair, pinched lips, eyes that scanned me like I was overdue library material. Well, she said, look what the river dragged back. Good to see you too, Harriet, I replied. Your charm hasn't aged a day, unlike everything else. Her eyes shifted to Corinne, and something flickered. Recognition? Guilt? Both? So, she said sharply, you found him. Corinne's breath caught. You knew? Harriet stepped back, motioning us inside with the enthusiasm of someone inviting termites into her walls. Come in. Might as well finish what your mother started. The living room smelled like lavender, dust, and pure hostility. Every surface was covered with crocheted doilies, sofa, lamps, even the TV remote. I sat carefully, afraid to wrinkle a doily and trigger an explosion. "Start talking," I said. "Now." Harriet folded her arms. "Your wife," she said slowly, "was terrified the day of the flood. She told me, if anything ever happened to her or that child, I should protect the girl from your recklessness." I flinched. "Reckless? I was trying to save her." "You tried," Harriet snapped. "But try telling that to Miriam on the day she sat in my kitchen crying, because you were always working on that cursed boat, always in that river." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My guilt, long buried, rose like a tide. Corinne stepped between us. "Are you saying you took me?" she demanded. Harriet's chin quivered for the first time in her life. "You washed up near my property, barely breathing. And when they found Miriam's scarf in the debris a day later," she swallowed, "everyone thought you were gone. And I didn't want him to destroy you the way he destroyed her hope." I felt the words like punches. "That wasn't your choice," I whispered. "You're right. But I made it anyway." Silence stretched. Heavy. Bruising. Then Corinne asked the one question I didn't expect. Was Mom involved? Harriet hesitated. Too long. My heart sank. "What aren't you saying?" I demanded. Harriet looked at me. Really looked. And for once, there was no fire in her eyes. Only fear. "Miriam knew," she said quietly. "She knew you survived." My world stopped. "She knew," Harriet repeated, voice trembling. "And she made me promise never to tell you." The room spun. The carpet swayed. My chest tightened. Corinne grabbed my hand as I struggled to breathe. Why would my own wife hide our daughter from me? Before Harriet could answer, someone knocked on the door. Hard. Urgent. Harriet's eyes widened. "Oh no," she whispered. "He wasn't supposed to come." My stomach dropped. And then the door opened, and the truth standing on that porch was worse than anything Harriet had confessed. The front door creaked open, and a man stepped inside without waiting to be invited. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that looked permanently annoyed by the existence of other humans. I recognized him immediately, even after all these years. My son, my only surviving child, Silas. He hadn't spoken to me in 15 years. Last time we saw each other, he accused me of living in the past and stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture frame fell and knocked over my ficus. The ficus never emotionally recovered. Now he stood in Harriet's doorway like he owned the place. "What are you doing here?" Silas barked. "What am I doing here?" I shot back. "What are you doing at Harriet's house?" "You hate her, Stu." Silas crossed his arms. "Mom asked her to keep me informed." I blinked. "Mom? You mean Miriam?" He nodded. My chest tightened. "Wait, you've been in contact with Harriet all these years." "About what?" His eyes slid to Corinne. "About her." Corinne stiffened. "You knew I existed?" Silas looked away, jaw clenching so hard I thought he'd snap a molar. "I found out when I was a teenager. Mom told me. She made me swear not to tell Dad." I grabbed the armrest to steady myself. You knew I had a daughter? That your sister survived? And you never told me?" Silas exploded. "What was I supposed to do?" "Mom said you'd get obsessed again. Said you'd ruin your life. Said you'd run back to that cursed river and drown yourself looking for answers." I felt something inside me crack, like an old window giving way in a storm. "She was my child," I whispered. "My child. And you kept her from me." Silas paced, hands tugging at his hair. "You were already falling apart back then. Mom said you'd break. She said you'd never forgive her if she told you the truth." Harriet, for once, stayed silent. Corinne stared at Silas like she was trying to recognize her own blood. "And what about me?" Corinne asked. Her voice was quiet but sharp. "Did anyone ever think about what I deserved?" Silas hesitated. "Mom thought she was protecting everyone." I laughed, one short, humorless bark. "Your mother couldn't protect a sandwich from the dog. And she hid an entire child." Harriet winced. Silas looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Corinne stepped forward. "Silas, did Mom ever want to meet me?" Silas swallowed. "She did. For years. But she was afraid. Ashamed. And then when she got sick," he wiped his eyes quickly, as if emotions might void his warranty. "She wrote something. For you, Dad. A letter." My breath caught. Miriam wrote a letter? Silas nodded and pulled an envelope from his jacket. Yellowed, creased, sealed. "For you. She told me to give it to you only if this day ever came." My hands shook as I held it. My wife's handwriting. 45 years of silence resting in my palms. Corinne gently squeezed my shoulder. "Open it," she whispered. I slid my thumb under the flap, slowly, carefully. The paper crackled. My heart pounded. But before I could unfold the letter, Harriet suddenly gasped. "Oh dear heavens, SIT down, ERL. I am sitting," I said. "No, not you, Silas." We turned and saw it. Silas, 6'3" and built like a refrigerator with legs, wobbling like a baby deer. Then he fainted, straight onto Harriet's crocheted ottoman, destroying it completely. Harriet shrieked, "My doily." Corinne covered her mouth. I muttered, "Serves it right." But even through the chaos, I clutched the letter, because inside it was the truth I'd waited my whole life to hear. And what I read next didn't just break me. It reshaped everything I believed about that flood and about my wife. Silas lay sprawled across Harriet's ruined ottoman like a tranquilized elk, one arm dangling dramatically, the other gripping a doily as if it were a life raft. Harriet kept patting his cheeks, yelling, "Wake up, you great OEF. You're crushing my stitchwork." Corinne and I exchanged a look that said, "This family is exhausting." But my hands weren't steady, because the letter, Miriam's letter, felt heavier than the house around us. I finally unfolded it. The paper smelled faintly of lavender, just like she always did. Her handwriting wobbled, but it was unmistakably hers. "My dearest Earl, if you're reading this, it means the truth has found you." My throat tightened. I was there the day they pulled Corinne from the river. I saw her alive, breathing, miraculously saved. And I made the worst decision of my life. Corinne froze beside me. "I thought the river had taken her once, and I couldn't let it take you too. You were drowning long before the flood, Earl, working yourself to the bone, never home, always with that boat." When Lydia slipped from my arms on that bridge, I blamed myself. When I saw her alive, I blamed you. And then, I blamed the river. I didn't know how to tell you she survived without losing you completely. I felt the words like a slow knife. Harriet offered to keep her until I could find the courage to tell you. But the courage never came. Every day I waited, and every day I became more afraid you would hate me. My vision blurred. When I got sick, I wanted to tell you so badly. But my shame was bigger than my bravery. And that is my greatest regret. If Corinne ever finds you, please forgive me. And please forgive yourself. The river took nothing from us that love cannot return. Corinne's hand slipped into mine. Warm, steady, real. When I finally lowered the letter, the room was silent, except for Harriet muttering something about idiot sons and flattened ottomans. Silas groaned and sat up, blinking like someone rebooting after a system crash. "What happened?" he mumbled. "You fainted," Harriet snapped. "On my heirloom." "It wasn't an heirloom," I said. "You bought it at a yard sale." "It had sentimental value," she insisted. Corinne leaned closer to me. "Earl, what do you feel right now?" I took a deep breath. 100 things, I said. Sad, angry, relieved, old, young, broken, mended, all at once. "And about Mom?" she whispered. I looked at the letter again, then at Corinne. "Your mother was wrong," I said softly. "But she wasn't cruel. She was scared. And I loved her for everything she was and everything she failed at." Harriet actually softened for a moment. Just a moment. "Well," she sniffed, "at least someone in this family acknowledges their mistakes." Silas pointed at the crushed ottoman. "You gonna acknowledge that one?" She whacked him with a throw pillow. But despite the chaos, I felt something shift inside me, like the first warm day after winter. I wasn't just losing my daughter that day in the flood. I was finding her now. But the truth wasn't done with us yet. Because something else, something Harriet never confessed, was about to surface, and it would change everything all over again. Harriet paced the room like a small, furious weather system, hands fluttering, lips pursed, muttering calculations only she understood. Corinne sat beside me on the couch, still holding my hand, as if anchoring me to the moment. Silas, having regained consciousness, tried scooting away from the shredded ottoman as if distancing himself might undo the crime. But something in Harriet's expression changed. A rare thing. Her mouth trembled, and not because she was about to yell or correct my posture. She looked troubled. "I wasn't entirely honest," she said finally. Silas groaned. "Oh great. Round 2. Harriet shot him a glare that could curdle milk. "I'm trying to confess, you buffoon." I sat up straighter. "Harriet, what else is there?" She swallowed, eyes darting toward the window as if checking for witnesses. When Miriam died, she said carefully, I received another letter. From her. Not the one Silas brought. A different one. For Corinne. Corinne stiffened. Me? Harriet nodded slowly. But I didn't give it to you. Silas scoffed. Of course you didn't. Harriet spun on him. Hush. This family is emotionally delicate right now. Corinne let out a shaky breath. Why would you keep a letter from me? Harriet pressed a hand to her chest. Because I wasn't sure you were ready. And, she hesitated. I wasn't sure I was ready. I frowned. Harriet, this isn't knitting club drama. Give her the letter. She sighed dramatically, as though the universe had personally offended her. Then she waddled to her hallway cabinet, a tall, squeaky thing that moaned like a haunted wardrobe, and rummaged through stacks of old papers, dish towels, and what looked like a lifetime supply of coupons. Finally, she returned holding a small pink envelope. The edges were soft, the handwriting unmistakably Miriam's. For you, Harriet whispered, handing it to Corinne. She wrote it the week before she passed. Corinne stared at it. Her fingers trembled. I don't know if I can read it. You don't have to, I said gently. We can read it together. Corinne nodded and slid her thumb under the seal. Inside was one page, a short one. Her eyes scanned it, then widened, then filled with tears that spilled too fast for her to wipe away. What does it say? I whispered. She handed me the letter with shaking hands. I read, My sweet Corinne, if you ever find Earl, please don't blame him for anything you were denied. I ask you for only one thing. Tell him the part of the story I never could. Tell him the truth I carried alone. It wasn't the river that took you from him. It was me. I let go first. My lungs froze. Corinne gasped. She blamed herself? And suddenly, there it was. The truth that had been missing all these years. Miriam had never forgiven herself for slipping on that bridge, for losing her grip, for choosing silence because shame was louder than love. I folded the letter carefully, reverently. Harriet sniffled loudly. Your mother wasn't cruel, she whispered. She was human. Silas wiped his face with his sleeve. I wish she'd told us. Corinne leaned into me, resting her forehead on my shoulder. Her voice was soft, breaking. She wanted us to find each other. I wrapped my arms around her, the first fatherly embrace I'd given her in 45 years. She didn't pull away. Harriet cleared her throat loudly. All right, that's enough emotion for one afternoon. My house can't take it. First my ottoman, now my mascara. Even Silas let out a quiet laugh. But deep down, I knew something else was shifting. Something fragile and precious was being rebuilt. Family. Yet even as the pieces came together, I felt one final thread tug at me, a truth I hadn't shared. A decision that would change all our lives when I finally spoke it aloud. I don't know what shifted inside me first, the anger, the grief, or the sudden weight of 45 years finally sitting in the right place. But as Corinne leaned against me, her hand still gripping my sleeve like she'd done as a toddler in that yellow raincoat, I felt something I hadn't felt since the day before the flood, a father's purpose. Harriet was blotting her mascara with a tissue the size of a napkin. Silas was awkwardly patting her back, like she was a malfunctioning appliance. And Corinne, she was breathing like someone who finally had space to. The room was quiet. Too quiet. Dangerously quiet. Which is why I chose that exact moment to say the thing I had been holding inside since the day I believed my daughter died. I want her to live with me. Corinne jerked upright. Silas choked on thin air. Harriet dropped her tissue and gasped like she'd been stabbed by a revelation. What? Corinne blinked, stunned. I took her hand. Not gently, not carefully, but firmly, like a father who meant every word. I lost you once, I said, because of fear, secrets, and a river that rose faster than I could react. I'm not losing you again. Not to guilt, not to distance, not to time. Her eyes filled again, not with sorrow this time, with something warmer. Hopeful. Silas stepped forward, rubbing his neck. Dad, are you sure? His voice was softer than I'd heard it in years. You're not young. And Corinne has a life of her own. I nodded. I'm old. Not dead. And I still remember how to make pancakes. Bad ones, but edible. Harriet muttered. Barely edible. But the edge in her voice softened. Corinne wiped her cheeks with the sleeve of her sweater. I wasn't expecting to be wanted, she whispered. I squeezed her hand tighter. You're not just wanted. You're mine. You always were. Silas looked between us, something shifting in him too. He leaned in and whispered to me, Dad, are you ready for this? I turned to him. Son, I spent 45 years ready for a child I thought I'd never see again. And I spent another 15 missing you while you avoided me. If the universe is handing me a second chance with both my children, I'm not wasting it. Silas swallowed hard. I didn't avoid you, he muttered. You avoided me, I corrected. He raised an eyebrow. You started it. Did not. Did too. You fainted on a doily, I reminded him. Corinne laughed, really laughed, the kind that fills a room and knits broken pieces back together. Then she said something so soft and so powerful it nearly stopped my heart. I want to stay with you, Earl, if you'll have me. I cupped her cheek. My home is yours, for as long as you want, whether that's a day or the rest of our lives. Harriet sniffled loudly. Oh, good grief, she muttered. I can't take all this tenderness. Someone hand me a fan before I melt like butter in July. Silas chuckled. Corinne leaned closer. I felt lighter than I had in decades. But as we sat there in that cluttered living room, surrounded by broken ottomans, tears, and second chances, I realized this wasn't the end. There was one more thing, something only I could reveal. A truth I'd carried alone, just like Miriam once had. A truth that would change everything and determine whether this new family we'd found could truly hold together. I stood up slowly, feeling every year in my bones, but also something new, something electric, running through me. Corinne looked up at me with a mixture of fear and hope, and Silas hovered awkwardly beside Harriet, who was fanning herself dramatically with a magazine titled Knitting Today. I need to tell you both something, I said. Something I've never admitted out loud. The room went still. For years, I continued, I blamed myself for what happened on that bridge. I told myself I should have held on tighter, been stronger, been faster. I carried that guilt like a backpack full of bricks. Corinne reached for my hand again. Her grip was steady now, not searching, anchoring. But today, I said, I'm letting it go. All of it. The river, the blame, the regrets. I've lived half a life with ghosts. I'm ready to live the rest with people. Harriet sniffed loudly. About time, she muttered. You've been moping since Nixon. Silas stepped closer, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Dad, I didn't know how to be around you after Mom died. I thought you didn't need me. His voice cracked. But maybe I needed you. I put a hand on his shoulder, the first father-to-son gesture we'd shared in years. I lost one child and shut out the other, I said. But I'm done losing. Corinne stood, wiping her cheeks with her palms. So what now, she asked. I smiled, slowly, warmly, the way I used to smile before the river took it from me. Now, I said, we start over. All of us. Together. Harriet huffed. If this means I'm hosting Thanksgiving, the answer is no. Silas rolled his eyes. No one wants your turkey, Harriet. I'll have you know, she snapped. My turkey won most moist in 1983. Only because the judges felt sorry for you, I said. Corinne burst out laughing, actual, joyful laughter, and suddenly the whole room joined in. For the first time in decades, my home, my family, my heart felt whole. Corinne hugged me then, tight, warm, real. Dad, she whispered. Not Earl, not sir, not maybe, just Dad. I closed my eyes and held her like I had been waiting a lifetime, because I had. And in that moment, everything clicked into place. I didn't lose my daughter in the flood. I found her in the years that followed. We survived, all of us, not by forgetting the past, but by deciding it wouldn't control our future. Silas stepped beside us, awkwardly trying to join the hug. He bumped into a lamp and knocked over one of Harriet's gnomes. She shrieked, he has a name. And somehow, that ridiculous moment, the gnome, the yelling, the mess, felt like the perfect beginning. I looked at my children, both of them, and said, let's go home. Because after 45 years of grief, I finally had one again.